Thank you very much. I think that's a wonderful way for us to end our panel with a powerful image of government as a catalyst and government as a collaborator to bring citizens and the private sector together to unleash creative potential. And it's a fantastic case study. I know we're falling a little bit behind on time. I don't know if you'd like me to open the stage to questions or if we would like to move on to our next panel. So wonderful, they've given me permission for questions. Can I ask the audience for any questions for a great panel?
Thank you. I have one question for Mr. Romani about the usage of the very well work on the open data. The content is most likely focuses on the intervention or the decision making, the usage of the open data up to this stage. Do you have in mind something for adding something for statistical aware, what we call it, monitoring indicators or something about the performance itself for the government or for the fields that you cover within the data, the open data platform that you have?
Well, the data that's released is actually very diverse in forms, shapes, and provenance. So there is, of course, process data and also data assets that have been aggregated through time. Thinking of course, regulation and law or statistics that are aggregated in the long term. But the idea is that those indicators should also help citizens monitor what government is doing. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve with those public debates that we've launched. We had a really interesting, around the Paris conference on open data and open government last week, we had a few workshops on specific topics and a really interesting conversation around what sort of indicators could help citizens make better informed choices in terms of public health. So in a way, this is not a administrative monitoring sort of data, but it's data that helps everyone monitor how their health or how the health system can help them better.
The gentleman in the front row.
I think a common theme that we've heard so far is starting up the open data efforts at different governments. And so I'm wondering if you could cast forward into the future 3 or 5 years when, as it seems that the critical mass is achieved, we have a number of governments around the world, most governments that are doing something with Open Data Portal. What do you think that we are talking about, what we're challenged by, and what we feel the successes are 3 or 5 years from now in the future?
Who wants to jump in? Gert?
To start from a strange angle, but I'm an absolute believer in shared services. We should be able, as a public service, to have our own kind of Google, where we, in a one site, we can find whatever we need as a citizen. While my experience, and I guess everybody's, citizens have been using Google, YouTube, Facebook, but public services, all their own machines and their own applications, and that's going to get together, and the data come along with it. And that will open up an enormous possibility also of sharing across nations data and have applications that work all over the world. Why can't I go to even the country next to Belgium and use my applications and so on? And it's quite difficult still for a citizen to move to another country and have and so on. So that's where we're heading, because people will start to not only to ask it. I like the quote this morning, it's going to be a revolution if we don't.
Romain?
So maybe I complement that with, I guess, two ideas. And the first one is, as we see that data is used in such wonderful ways by innovators outside of government, people inside of government will start to be a little restless and want to use the same powerful tools and instruments. And that, of course, requires having more data than we collect today. So what I hope for is to see maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the road, much more focus on data-driven policies, similar to other things that the city of New York has been doing by targeting intervention thanks to prior data analysis in a much more effective way. I'm talking about what the New York Fire Department has been doing, for instance, looking at buildings where fire risks was much higher, and you could predict it thanks to data. The other thing that could be interesting is using data as a tool, or as a policy-making tool itself. And what I mean by this is when we see how the change that comes from making some aspects of government transparent, it becomes obvious, at least in my eyes, that we could use it to regulate entire aspects of the economy in a much more lightweight and effective manner than by having inspections and risking to miss some of the challenges. And so an example of this is what the G8 last year was working on with beneficial ownership. If we think that there's a case to be made that companies should know their beneficial owners, then, well, we could make it public. That would enable others to work with this data and make it useful. If we think that we're facing other global challenges, then why not use transparency as a tool to solve them? First of all, we'll have more eyeballs on the problem, as we say in computer science, and it will also make the challenge itself better understood.
Agreed. Would you like to add?
I believe that innovation is coming all over us. It's coming every day. It's developing every day. We cannot put it in one side. We cannot say innovation and application. We cannot say innovation. People are developing. That's what we are mainly talking about people. People are seeing other experiences in different parts of the world. So having access to different experiences, like just the French experience, the Flemish experience, if you want to make it open for everybody and everybody can see it, and we can have more experiences to be launched, to be added on our websites, to be having more activities just like this seminar, if we can have it in different parts of the world, so we can share all our knowledge and all our experiences worldwide. And this is one way to encourage innovation and creativity in public sector or private sector, and open government and open data.
Wonderful. Are we opened with South Korea? And we can close our session with
Yes.
insights from South
Okay.
Korea.
Maybe I think the type of government 3.0 is more advanced, and through intelligence and technology, our institution is also changed and rapidly. Yeah, so maybe between private sector and public sector is there's no barrier, and maybe it's getting together. Maybe it's very advanced time. Maybe I think so. Yeah.
On that visionary round of answers, it leaves it to me to just thank our fantastic panel and thank you, the audience, for what I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. Thank you very much.
Our final session of the day is chaired by Mr. Andrew Stott and entitled Security Issues of Open Data Cloud Technology. Members of the sessions are Mr. Carl Chambers, Mr. Eddie Vanderstock, Mr. Tai Lambo, and Mr. Vishal Maria. Please welcome them to the stage.
Okay, the final session of the day, so we'll crack on straight away. So this session is about security of data and security of the cloud. And it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker here, Mr. Carl Chambers. 20 years in the military, including the Royal Marines Commando Training Centre. So distinguished career there, and over 35 years experience managing and measuring enterprise risks in the military, in banking, healthcare, and in the international hospitality sectors. Helped the US Agency for International Aid obtain consecutive A+ grades on its cybersecurity report card, and is a very competitive and often ruthless player of Kaluki, which is the most Googled word of the day, I think, which is a form of card game.
It is, it is.
So, Carl.
Good afternoon, all. I want to thank the United Nations and the Emirates Identity Authority for the invitation for me to speak today. This is indeed an honor to be in this great city and this great country. We did a poll earlier, and I'm going to ask us to just repeat that poll, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask you to let your fingers do some more work. Can you answer that question again for me, please? All right. Less than half of this room believes the data that the government or governments would provide. Why is this so? Any suggestions? I'm asking you the questions. Why? Any ideas?
I think people have had a very uneven experience with government services. So on one occasion, they'll have a very good experience, but then very often with another branch of government or local branch of government, they'll have a very poor experience. So when we ask a question like a very general question, I think that citizens have a very uneven experience when dealing with government.
Right.
Sometimes that experience is very high and they tend to take it for granted. And other times the experience is very poor and we as citizens tend to remember that poor experience. So I think that people don't uniformly trust that government is going to deliver, and so there is suspicion so that you see the graph split, the poll split in terms of response.
Okay. So I want to tie this back to, a good answer, to a couple of observations that I made this morning. One is, there was a slide which said, good data equal good investment. What if good data became bad data? What if good data that is stored in a government system was somehow changed in an unauthorized fashion? Especially if the data is residing in a cloud-based solution. And that solution became compromised and the data was changed. We heard the example this morning of the Federal Reserve Bank. So Federal Reserve Bank is providing reports with financial data that countries and entrepreneurs and companies are using for strategic decisions and planning. What if that data suddenly becomes changed and incorrect?
There's a way around that problem. Some of the new database technologies never overwrite existing data, they only append it.
Right.
So that you can keep a legacy of all the different data set data that's in there, so you can just roll back in time and go back once you've identified that there has been an act.
Good. But the perception, though, is that if the data is somehow changed, then you can't trust it. So the challenge is what you see on this board. As governments move towards cloud solutions to provide data to its citizens anywhere, anytime, on any device, it has to do so securely. What I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes is how to achieve that level of security that will in turn provide that level of trust. To ensure the protection of sensitive data and the protection of personable identifiable data, hosted our process on cloud solutions, I want to suggest 3 key principles. The first one is design and build it securely. Secondly is to operate it securely. And thirdly, to always use encryption. To design and build it securely, there is a principle in IT development in that it is always more cost-effective to build security into your application rather than to add security after the fact. To operate the cloud securely, we also must remember that security threats occur daily and they're changing, which means that our security controls must be able to cope with that changing daily threat. Remember, the bad guys must only get it right once, whereas the good guys must get it right every time. When data is encrypted, of course, we make it unintelligible to the human eyes. And that provides a level of protection. So wherever the data is, it's protected. I'm going to use a couple of case studies or examples from the United States, where I live and work. I will just add that, in case you're confused about my accent, I was born in Jamaica, not New York. Yes. So the US federal government has mandated 2 processes to securely design and build cloud solutions. The first one is the Cloud Risk Management Framework, and the second one is this one called FedRAMP, Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. The Cloud Risk Management Framework is a 6-step process, which starts firstly with the categorization of your system. The data that is stored or processed in the system is categorized to determine its sensitivity. If a system is classified as a high system, then it simply means it needs a higher level of security. If it's classified as a low system, it means that it requires a much lower level, if any, security. Once you have gone through step 1, then you go to step 2, which then determine what is your security control baseline. What is the minimum set of controls that you need to secure that system? The third step is then to implement those security controls. The fourth one is this FedRAMP process, where the security controls, once they've been implemented, are assessed to determine if they are in fact in place and functioning as intended. And of course, the sixth one is the most difficult one, and that is, once the system is operational, how do you ensure that it stays secure? Because you can be secure today and tomorrow you're not. The FedRAMP process is fairly new, and over the last 3 or so years, the federal government agencies have been encouraging their industry partners to ensure that their cloud solutions have gone through the FedRAMP process. And on June 6th of this year is the deadline. All cloud security solutions to be implemented by US federal agencies must be FedRAMP certified. One of the key aspects of this FedRAMP certification is that the assessment of the controls must be done by independent third party. And these are assessors who are certified to become FedRAMP assessors. And these assessments are done against the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, which is a federal agency that has created a number of standards for security. So let's talk about operating it securely. And this is where, in my opinion, the greatest shift in security is occurring in the United States as it relates to infosecurity. There's a huge shift from managing security by compliance to managing security by risk in real time. In the world of compliance, assessments and audits are done periodically, sometimes every 3 years, as in the case of the United States. But now there's a shift for it to be done in real time. And real time is defined as 3 days. that your security posture of the federal systems must be updated every 3 days. Huge shift. This can only be accomplished through automation. And of course, with that automation, you need to be able to provide that reporting through the necessary dashboards. I want to talk about one particular tool which is being used in a number of US agencies, including the Department of Defense, US State Department, and the US Treasury. It's called the Analytics and Continuous Monitoring Engine, ACE. ACE provides a scalable data ingest, collection, storage, processing platform which is currently supporting several federal enterprise environments. It monitors millions of devices and processes multitudes of data inputs from thousands of sensors. Through a common operational and situational awareness picture, ACE delivers accurate and timely view of the operational risks by providing a 360-degree view of assets, of IT assets, which will include software and hardware, and the vulnerabilities within those hardware and software. From this diagram, if you're able to read it, at the top, ACE collects sensors, information from various sensors, whether they're from IDSs or firewalls. It then collects them, massages that data, and turn it into usable intelligence, into something that is measurable and that can be acted on. ACE will collect information from systems like scanners like Nessus, EI Retina, McAfee ePolicy, Orchestrator, and hundreds of other sensors. So this is actually a management tool which collects the data in real time. So it's collecting data on technical controls. As an example, 3 weeks ago, we had a vulnerability that was unleashed. Anyone know the name of it? Heartbleed, correct. It was a vulnerability within a very trusted piece of software that we all use for encryption, an SSL software. Many companies scrambled to figure, do I have the vulnerability? And if so, which of my devices had the vulnerability? An application like this would immediately give you those answers. One, because this application it functions based on your asset inventory, and it knows what the version of the software that you're running, and it will be able to tell you which device and where those devices are that are vulnerable. So it eliminates the manual step or process of trying to determine whether you are vulnerable. Always encrypted data. The key here is that data, whether it's in transit or in storage, and here now we're talking about sensitive data. Obviously, if the data isn't sensitive, then you don't need to encrypt it. But if you're handling, for instance, your taxation, if you're collecting taxes from your citizens and you have personal identifiable data, then you need to be able to protect that. Certainly in the United States, there's the Privacy Act requires the protection of such data. And if you're going to be moving tax data, social security numbers and addresses that can, data that can be used to identify individuals, then that data must be encrypted. As a case study, the San Diego Housing Authority in Texas adopted a cloud-based solution for electronic signature service that lets that agency and participating landlords electronically sign and transmit documents. The service used is called Adobe Echosign, and this has cut down the processing time for providing payment to property owners and landlords participating in a housing choice voucher program from 90 days to a matter of hours, simply by moving documents over the internet and getting it signed and encrypted. Adobe Echosign relies on SSL ASE encryption to safeguard the integrity of documents, both when in motion and at rest. In motion, Echosign leverages SSL using 128-bit AES encryption, and at rest, it uses a Linux Unified Key System LUX, which is also 128K AES encryption standard. So the three key principles again is build and implement your cloud solution securely, number one. Two, operate it securely through automated continuous monitoring. And thirdly, encrypt sensitive data at all times. Thank you so much.